you. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for this November Twin Ports Climate Conversation. Again, my name is Julie McDonald. I'm with Minnesota's Lake Superior Coastal Program at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Today, we have a guest speaker here to talk with us about resilient housing in a changing climate. Before we get to that, I want to share a little more with you about these climate conversations, who we are, and why we host these conversations. So these Twin Ports climate conversations have been ongoing since 2016. They're the result of collaboration between staff at Minnesota's Lake Superior Coastal Program, Minnesota Sea Grant, 1854 Treaty Authority, City of Superior Environmental Services, and a lot of other participants over the years. Also, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration Office for Coastal Management also supports our work as a funder of the state coastal management programs throughout the United States, and including our program here in Minnesota. This work would not be possible without the contributions and talents of all the partners shown here, and for this, I am very thankful. Next slide. We have set some goals for these climate conversations early on since we started. We really do want to support improving climate communication skills for everyone. We want to improve and increase climate change related data collection and sharing, motivate and support community-based adaptation efforts, and increase climate change conversation in more sectors and broaden the impact. And certainly not least, we want to include climate justice in each and every conversation. Next slide, Madison, thanks. And finally, I just wanted to set the stage a little bit for why we're here. This is a Minnesota DNR fact sheet showing how Minnesota's climate is already changing. To name a few of these climate parameters that are changing, we're getting warmer and wetter. We're experiencing more damaging rains. We're experiencing fewer days and nights of extreme cold in the winter. Minnesota's climate is already changing rapidly and will continue to do so into the foreseeable future. These changes are impacting waters, wildlife, plants, historic and current resources, and infrastructure. We need your help to adapt. I'm going to share a link in the chat for everyone. If you want to access this fact sheet from the DNR website, you can find out what other Minnesotans around the state, how they're observing the changing climate, and more about what the DNR is doing to mitigate and adapt. So, our topic today is meant to help us all consider one important way for our community adaptation, which is to integrate resilient housing infrastructure into our communities. So we can end these slides and have Rachel load up hers now. I'm going to introduce Rachel Wagner, who has very kindly joined us today to share her knowledge and innovative thinking for sustainable housing solutions in the upper Midwest. As a designer and architect, Rachel has extensive experience in the building industry. And as a member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps, Rachel is also well-versed in how the climate is changing, and she is committed to supporting sustainable action for climate adaptation and mitigation. Rachel will offer a presentation, and then we'll have time for questions afterward. So please enter your questions in the chat as you think of them, and then we'll get to those toward the end. So now I'd like to turn it over to you, Rachel, if you're ready, and thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. So today's, I'm going to share a little bit about my work and my experience, and I'm going to try to relate it to what I imagine your work and experience might be. And I'm going to try to relate all of that to important concepts of sustainability and resilience for our housing in a changing climate. I didn't prepare a talk that outlines all of the steps I think we need to take for our housing in the face of this. That would have been probably a longer talk, but hopefully I will touch on some key kind of paradigm shifts that I think we need within the context of resilient housing. And I guess paradigm shift, if I had to find two words to describe the trajectory of my work, it would be that. So I think I'm going to be sharing a lot of my own paradigm shifts with you this afternoon. I went to college in the 1980s. I studied design and architecture. And with the exception of one elective course that I took about energy and passive solar design, I learned almost nothing about the environmental impacts or the resource intensity of our buildings. I graduated, I entered the workforce, went to work for an architect, and I learned a lot more about design and a fair amount about community engagement, which turned out to be more important than I realized at the time. But it wasn't until almost 10 years later, in 1997, living in Duluth, that I started to focus or refocus my practice on energy and resource efficient design. And I used to say that I had moved to a climate where literally you could freeze to death in your home if your boiler went out on Christmas Eve. So I became better at design. As I improved the homes I designed, I still really was primarily focused just on the buildings. In 1999, I went to my first talk about climate change at a building energy conference. The speaker was Randy Udall, a name that might be familiar to many of you. It was life-altering, and it spurred another big paradigm shift for me. That lecture was the first step in a largely self-directed educational journey that changed everything for me about how I viewed architecture, housing, resourcefulness, society, and the environment. And I began to see housing in a larger context. Maybe more importantly, I began to see my role in the housing system as perhaps larger than simply being a designer of good, energy efficient buildings. The image on this slide is from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA.gov. And about every 3 years, they conduct something called REX, the Residential Energy Consumption Survey. They also do one for commercial buildings, but I focus on the residential building one. So part of my role changing has become a consumer of information that is produced and available for free, largely online. And so some of the resources that I use, and some of you may be familiar with these or not, is the EIA.gov, as I said, the Energy Information Administration. Another one I'll be talking about is the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, where I go for information every 2 years to see how the state is tracking on meeting its targets laid out in the Next Generation Energy Act legislation that passed in 2007 that some of you might be familiar with, about the path toward decarbonization for the state of Minnesota. They track greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption over 9 sectors. One of them is residential, and residential is not doing well. The baseline year is 2005, and between 2005 and the last year that they reported, which was 2020, I believe, emissions were still up 14% from the baseline. This is despite the fact that we are supposed to be some 25% lower. So we're in the wrong direction, and we're about 40% off from where we need to be with our housing in Minnesota. That's kind of a frame of reference or reference point. And the reason for that largely is because we continue to burn fossil fuels for heating, cooking, and water heating in our homes. And in the state of Minnesota, despite the fact that the climate is warming, we still consume, most of us in our housing, about 2/3 of our energy for space heating. And if most of that energy is coming from natural gas, we have a long way to go with dealing with climate change. And we also have a long way to go with being more resilient when our homes are relying on kind of a steady supply of uninterrupted energy in order to keep us warm when we're cold, cooler when we're hotter. So this is an example of sort of systems thinking. As I learned more, I began to understand the housing system as a system within much larger systems. And really, that led to another big paradigm shift. And that is kind of characterized by the quote by Naomi Klein about climate change, telling us that our system is failing, that there's something fundamentally wrong with how we organize our economy, how we take care of people, really, fundamentally. And this mattered deeply to me in terms of housing, because housing is different from other buildings. Housing is a basic need. I sometimes like to say that, not that we want to shut down all of our commercial buildings, but we could get along without an awful lot of the built environment that we have created. But we need shelter fundamentally. And access to healthy, durable, affordable housing isn't guaranteed, really never has been for most of us, or equitable. We face a housing shortage in our region and frankly, in most communities in the country. So we need more housing. We also need better housing. Aging housing stock is dilapidated in many, many parts of the country. We also have a shortage in the construction trades. We need more people working in the housing sector. And part of the reason you're all here today, we need to deal with climate change. Well, this kind of presents an opportunity about what kind of shifts we can make in how we approach housing, how we approach meeting this basic fundamental need for all of our citizens in a way that is equitable, robust, and resilient, knowing what we're facing in a changing climate, or at least speculating some of it, of course, but knowing a lot. And Julie mentioned at the beginning, we're already seeing changes, especially with regard to extreme weather events, having a good understanding of not just how to build our housing, but where. And I guess it boils down to, for me, this kind of question of what kind of future do we want to build? Housing impacts so much of our abilities to meet our other basic needs as well. So it impacts so much, and it's also impacted by so much. Our policies around land use, our policies around property taxes, who pays for what, shared resources, infrastructure. A lot of dots to connect. And the more I understand and the more I connect the dots, the more I realize I have to learn. Something that figures prominently is perspective, sort of who is at the table helping to define our needs, what resilient housing means. I think something fundamental that we can agree on is that our houses tend to last for decades, if not centuries. And so when we make decisions about any of our buildings, we need to consider the impacts over time and under changing conditions. This is complex, the way that we're looking at multifamily versus single family, what climate we're in, both on a macro scale geographically, but also on a micro scale. Are you in a flood zone? Are you in what could be a flood zone? Should we be rebuilding in areas that have been damaged by floods? How just we sort of relocate and shift? It can be really hard to know where to look. And as I started with perspective, it really depends who is doing the looking. And I think this is really, really significant when we think about where decisions get made and who is present when those decisions get made. When we're talking about resiliency and many of these things, I like to start with definitions. For me anyway, it's good to have definitions. Really at its core, if something is sustainable, it means we can continue with it at its present rate or maintain it the way that we're doing it now for a long period of time. That's what it means to sustain something. When we're talking about resiliency, we're talking about the ability of something to recover, hopefully quickly and fully from harm, stress, shock, or damage. We also talk about flexibility, adaptability. Resiliency means when something happens, can it perform in a different way and still, or can it adapt and be used in a different way and still be useful to us? And when I look at this definition of resiliency, and I think about able to recover quickly and fully from harm, stress, shock, or damage, right then and there, we're talking about more than just climate change, but absolutely, we're talking about all kinds of extreme events and impacts that happen with regard to our housing. Some of them weather related, absolutely. Some of them infrastructure related. What happens when there's a power outage? Some of them are economical and societally related. What happens when we lose our job or our health insurance or our car, and the shock that's impacting our ability to remain in our housing is coming at us from one of those connected systems? These are all questions I think we need to grapple with when we are talking about adaptability and resiliency of our housing and the systems it contains and it supports. I would say that right now, very little in our society is sustainable or resilient using these definitions. I would say that many of us as individuals are very resilient. And this has always been the case, and it's extremely useful to us. But admitting how much is unsustainable and not resilient, I think, is the first step toward moving towards systemic change that maybe can have the positive impact that we seek. So climate change is impacting and exacerbating what I would say are already fragile systems in our society. So let's go a little bit deeper into a definition. This is how we define sustainable housing in my firm and my work, and many others of my colleagues around the country and the world would agree at this point in time. It's a lot more than just energy efficiency and higher performance. Number one, it's healthy. And that's not just for the occupants. Number two, it's durable. It can hold up to some of these shocks, right? It's more robust, and it can be repaired and maintained. That's part of durability as well. Number three, it uses little to no energy from fossil fuels. We absolutely need to move away from powering our homes with fossil fuels. And the good news is we know how to do this and we can. We're there. And number four, it's accessible and affordable to everyone. So none of the items on this list, I think, really are negotiable at this point. And that means that sustainable housing is not a luxury item. It's not a well, if. It's a must. And I would say that sustainable housing is adequate housing. And we have a pretty straightforward framework here, or definition that we can use to vet our ideas, our approaches when we are looking at making changes to our existing housing stock, adding new housing. Does it fit within these four criteria? If it doesn't, I think we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, why not? Why are we perpetuating something that we know to be fragile and insufficient? So I'm going to go a little deeper into these definitions and go back to that first one, which is health, because that is the number one priority. Our housing, our shelter is meant to keep us safe and healthy. And so what do we need for health in our homes? Well, we need a steady supply of fresh air. We need a way to control pollutants. We should not have exposure to poisons or toxins. We need access to clean drinking water. We need the ability to stay comfortable inside. And we kind of need to be able to sustain these pretty much indefinitely. Sadly, in a society that doesn't meet everyone's basic needs, it's not surprising that our poorest and our most vulnerable residents often reside already in the unhealthiest housing and in the unhealthiest communities. So again, as we approach kind of resiliency and thinking about what we want to change, we're not only trying to fix something that's already broken, but we're trying to stay now a couple of steps ahead and not exacerbate something that already is problematic. How might we approach these things? So I will tell you a little bit about my current work. After that lecture by Randy Udall in 1999, where I started to learn about climate change and the impacts that buildings was having on global warming and resource depletion, my understanding of the world and maybe my place in it shifted. And so I redirected and I adapted my work in response, not just once, but over and over. So hence the paradigm shifts, always in response to the context around me and trying to utilize my growing understanding of energy, sustainability, resiliency, and equity. So I now operate a small company called Just Housing. We design good buildings, suitable, sustainable, resilient, we hope, for our climate and our communities. We want this kind of housing to be the norm instead of the exception that it still remains. So at Just Housing, we practice standardization. Pretty much everything we do is meant to be replicable and scalable. In other words, not customized, with the exception that I would say was customized for a colder climates. The development of sustainable housing powered by clean energy is a recognized solution for this moment in time. It's energy efficient, fossil fuel free, and resilient. So we do not design new housing with fossil fuels, period. That's a line in the sand for us. Our buildings are all electric. And when we work on existing homes, we're moving toward electrification. We design ready-to-build plans, so we have a number of standardized designs for single-family and two-family homes that are widely applicable for infill housing, for new developments, both in cities, small towns, and rural areas, really geared toward, again, colder climates, so the upper Midwest, or let's say the Northeast. We think this is a type of solution moving toward scalability. So taking houses where it matters where you face it south, but creating plans that can be flipped east to west is an example of it. All of the houses being built essentially the same way, even though they are different designs. Again, sort of replicability, scalability, we hope. I think that by working in this way, eventually there could be an impact on overall community resiliency. And I think it goes without saying that our approach to design is following those 4 tenets that I outlined earlier. So with absolute understanding of health and durability, resiliency, the ability to operate both passively, but also with the mechanical systems all working intact. These are some of the pieces to this type of sustainable or adequate housing. I like to say that it's not rocket science, but it is science. So we use energy modeling for each of our designs. We adhere to building science principles. So we understand the physics of how our buildings are impacted by water and the flows of energy with heat transfer, with air movement. And then we adhere to very straightforward rules that I've been taught for years and follow. This isn't something we invented. We deal with the enclosure first, designing smart. We deal with the systems second, all electric, super efficient mechanical systems. All of these homes are ready for solar PV systems, but they don't have to be connected to solar energy, but they are all electric. We understand how these houses will operate if there is an interruption to a power source. So can we provide ventilation through cross ventilation with windows and more passive means? Can the occupants coast for several days because the structure can stay either warmer or cooler depending upon the season because of the air sealing and the robust enclosure with lots of insulation? Are we managing water? Is it repairable? So you'll notice overhangs on our roofs. So our fundamental design approach is taking into account the building being able to shed water and being on higher ground. We're rigorous, but what you're seeing here isn't new. Unfortunately, most of our homes, even new homes, are not designed or built like this. The barriers to widespread adoption of green housing practices, though, are not technological. I think they're largely social and economic, including a persistent lack of access to affordable and reliable design and construction services, information, training, and opportunity. In our work, we are trying to provide solutions and information as widespread, as open source as possible. And we're trying to make this information accessible, deployable, cost-effective, absolutely, and reliable. So these are tested, vetted assemblies based on years of work in the field, study, and also interactions with builders. Most of them are not proprietary, so you should be able to build like this using a variety of materials, understanding the principles of good water management, durability, and health, but not being solely reliant upon one vendor, one producer, one approach. And this requires information, knowledge, practice. We adjust and we update our own designs based on what's working, what isn't, what's new, feedback from other folks in the industry, people that we're working with directly, but also people that we are learning from. We also create solutions for existing homes, which, as I said, need a lot of work. Maintaining and improving a home's ability to provide adequate housing requires the same kind of knowledge and resources and skill and care, maybe even more care. It's definitely harder to bring an existing home up to these same standards for sustainability than it is to start new and get everything right the first time. But it's totally doable, and it really, really matters. We have not only followed building science, but we are now certified building analysts in my office. So we do assessments of existing homes. We make recommendations for improvements using those same 4 principles: health, durability, reducing the use of fossil fuels, and affordability. And really the paradigm for this, when we're working on existing housing, is put it back much better than you found it. If we're going to preserve our existing housing and continue to work on it and make it resilient for current and future conditions, better often means different. We need to think about water management differently. We need to address indoor air quality and make sure that occupants in the existing homes have a steady supply of fresh air and can expel pollutants, especially if we tighten up, insulate, and air seal our homes. Then it's even more important to put in mechanical ventilation. Again, we know how to do all of this, but we're not necessarily doing it. A lot of the folks that I work with, builders, analysts, community organizers, educators, they all help us in our office get ready to build for the next generation. And I am so grateful for the assistance, the camaraderie, the support of others working in my field and related fields with similar goals. There is such connection between our trades, our fields, our systems, the larger systems that we reside within. And the more I practice, the more I recognize that this is how we get ready to make change. This is how we make change. It's about relationships. So it's important to see the relationships, the context in which your thing, so to speak, resides, and the interdependence of your thing with all the other things, both seen and unseen around it. This is monumental, and maybe it's sort of my sort of closing paradigm shift. The technological side of the things that I've gotten good at doing, the houses, well, they're kind of like the trees, and they matter, but the forest matters even more. And to be effective, to be of use, we work within the bigger ecosystems that impact housing and that housing impacts. So this has been a shift both in the model of our business and the content of what we offer and who we work with. So we prioritize clients who lack access to design services, to education and training. We offer all of our services on a sliding scale. We focus efforts toward collaborations that can support, magnify, and amplify our impact. And this has done two things that I think are worth mentioning. One, it's brought us into venues and communities that I don't think we would have been otherwise. So I believe that we are expanding our reach and being of service. But two, it has made us much, much better at what we do because our work is now informed by and advised by folks that we simply were not interacting with before. And we are all the richer for it. So we say that another big piece of our business is we provide tools for the trades to build green. We really focus on the lack of knowledge and training in the workforce and also the shrinking workforce. So we are working with existing builders, but we are also training apprentices, people in workforce training, our incoming professionals, and those who maybe haven't settled on a career in the trades or trades-related work. But inviting them to consider it. The technology and the knowledge to build this way, as I said earlier, are well developed, but it's really still held in the hands of a small fraction of practitioners. This needs to change if we want the ecosystem of how we approach our housing to change. So we're trying to change that, at least in our little corner. We work with high schools, colleges, nonprofits, municipalities. We work directly with builders and workforce development agencies. Working with students does a lot of things to build resiliency. We're helping to build awareness about the impacts of climate change, where buildings, in particular our housing, kind of fit into that ecosystem, and the fact that there's a link at all. So we get the opportunity to connect the dots with younger and younger audiences, and they get it really fast. We've been working on a project over the last year called Empowerment, where we engage both with students and instructors to help catalyze a much needed climate resilient green workforce. And the Empowerment Project just grew a little bit more too, where we're working with some local professionals as well. The idea being, if we can assist in giving folks sort of the tools to then move this movement forward and empower others to take these steps and move things, then we've expanded or amplified our own impact. Working with teenagers, young folks, that supports me at least as much as I support them. It's where a lot of my hope comes from. So I'm going to kind of close with just maybe giving you a little bit, maybe some takeaways. This is a tool that I find helpful in everything I do. It's called the design thinking process, and I think it is a tool for resiliency. This is something that is most familiar to people in the design and architecture profession, engineering as well. But this is a tool that can be taught, it can be transferred, it can be used to solve any number of problems, both personal, professional, citywide, community-wide, organization-wide. And it's 5 steps, and you do it in a cycle. You observe and define to identify and understand the issue you're trying to address. You imagine, you generate possible solutions with no squashing of creative impulse. There are no bad ideas during this part of the process. Everything is on the table. You are open to anything. Often the most innovative solutions come during this. And then you pause. But now you are going to vet those potential solutions. Can we do this? What works? What might not? Do we want to test this? And then we move on and we select and develop discrete potential solutions. Work out the kinks, come up with some prototypes. Again, this might be a program. This might be a policy. This might be a house design. This might be a retrofit strategy, an educational program or a piece of curriculum. And then you put it into action. You have to implement it. You have to really test it in a different way and then evaluate it. And be brutal in your evaluation. Be willing to discard what didn't work. And then come back to step one. So that in a nutshell is design thinking. As you practice design thinking, I invite you to utilize the definitions of sustainability and resiliency. So when you're testing, when you're saying, does this work? You need to say, is it meeting what we defined earlier? And consider the larger context in which your focus exists, the trees and the forest. I always say that, I try to fix homes, make them better without making them worse, because that happens. We need everybody and we need everything. So this goes back to Naomi Klein's statement about climate change as a message. If we're really going to tackle resiliency, we have to do it on all levels with everyone. We need compassionate and bold, socially and technologically appropriate solutions. And I think it's really important for us all who are working in this to recognize that sometimes the appropriate thing is the thing not to do. In fact, I think the things that we stop doing are as important, probably more important than the things we start doing. And when sustainability and resiliency are the goal, we have to be willing to say no. So as you consider what you do in your work, in your life, I hope you will employ your heart, your mind, and your community, and keep connecting the dots within the forest and the trees. Thank you. Oh, and before I go, oops, I didn't do a resource list for you all, but I want to point to a few things on the last slide that are resources. That's the BPI, Department of Energy, Zero Energy Ready Home, the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. We are a member, and that is a coalition within 9 states across the upper Midwest, and the Climate Reality Leadership Corps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. Really, it's great to hear just even a little sliver of your thinking. And we're so fortunate to have you here in the upper Midwest region. We do have some questions. I think more than one participant might be wondering about this, but we're wondering if you could say a little more about the workforce trainings that you're engaged in, your vision and the different groups you train and where they're held and any kind of numbers of people or how that happens. It's a really exciting part of what you do.
Sure, thank you. So the first thing is we looked around and we didn't see enough evidence at all of workforce training in bringing people into the trades within kind of a climate-informed paradigm and even a building science paradigm. And for us, we took it one step further, which is we wanted to inform all of our workforce training efforts. So we do both curriculum development and instruction. we wanted to make sure that the contexts were always present, and context as plural. So, of course, climate change, having people recognize the context of climate change and what it meant to decarbonize and what it meant to be resilient. Absolutely a focus on building science, because if we're going to be touching our buildings, we need it to be sound from the standpoint of, moisture, heat, air, and you can inform and teach these fundamentals that then folks can carry on in whatever path they go. But then the third context that we really wanted to stress was that of equity, and the fact that over and over again, those with the least get the least, and how vulnerable that makes folks who are already vulnerable. And we found that that framing the training we created that way was particularly impactful, because the folks that we are engaging with, I think, are finding a deeper meaning and relevance to this kind of work, how much it matters, how important it is, how it's not just about gutters and overhangs and triple pane windows, that it's about keeping people healthy, able to care for their families, able to work within their community, and reaching the communities and sharing knowledge with who needs it the most. So that's sort of the background. We are, so I had been doing professional training and education in resource efficient and energy efficient buildings since 2005. So that's where it started. I would present continuing education classes at conferences and at builder trainings that were hosted in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, on the East Coast, kind of around the country. So pretty specialized for existing professionals. Now what we've done is we've turned just taking these kind of like one-off classes into a whole suite of curriculum courses that can be kind of mixed or matched and taught at a beginner level or an advanced level, some of it hands-on with a small group of folks. And we occasionally just offer it ourselves, or occasionally we just go, let's say, to a conference, but we're doing it more and more in conjunction with other workforce training organizations. And so we did 2.5 years worth of training through the nonprofit Green New Deal Housing here in Duluth. They were delivering this type of training to Community Action Duluth's community construction program. That was one sort of group that we worked with for months. They also were training local builders and providing continuing education units, CEUs, for licensed contractors, but also just kind of general hands-on training for building professionals who wanted it. We have worked with the City of Minneapolis's Green Careers Exploration Program, delivering trainings through them. So they provide the people, we kind of set up prerequisites and we go and train. We've worked with Minneapolis Climate Action down at the Regional Apprenticeship Training Center in Minneapolis. We've worked with the Conservation Corps of Minnesota. We are working with Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, doing a variety of trainings through them, all informed this way. And then we've worked with high schools. That's been really fun. So we're working with 2 high school shop teachers coming in periodically to their carpentry classes and teaching building science, teaching passive solar design, talking about why it's cool, why it matters. And we're going to be doing a building project with these 2 schools, Cloquet High School and Renshaw High School. That's going to start in February. We've been laying the groundwork this year, and through the winter, we'll be laying more groundwork. And each of these classes is going to build the same small, super insulated building. So it's kind of like a miniature version of a zero net energy house, but it's an 8 by 12 zero net energy shack, freestanding, so that they can apply the principles that they're learning directly to a small building. We've brought in 2 construction professionals who are assisting, so they're getting kind of contact with builders. And each of those little buildings, when finished, is being donated to a local organization for use on their site. And the students are super jazzed about this. So I don't, this goes back to thinking outside the box, right? that's what we're
Yes.
doing.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for kind of making our communities better and um, building capacity in current and future generations so that we can all have adequate housing eventually with that goal. We do have a few more questions here. One quick one is just a quick question. Do you use GIS in this work, geographic information systems?
Oh,
Um,
sort of. I mean, I guess only in that anytime I'm working on an actual site, we're going to do a house on a site, I go up to the Land Explorer for whatever county. So that's
see.
to get the lay of the land. And I love the imaging where I can have like the 2-foot contours. Thanks for putting those up, you guys. Don't stop.
I think we have got some folks in here who might be working on that. So great. Thank you. Another question is, what would you see as the biggest challenge for resilient housing for us living in northern Minnesota or northern Wisconsin? Is that like workforce to implement kind of resilient housing? Workforce, aging housing, cold climate, affordability?
I think I think it's at a higher level and one that I'm not sure I even know how to articulate. I I don't see the money, the dollars and the policy going to the places where it's needed the most in order to really push this. And, as an example, they're just I saw that Lincoln Park Middle School in the paper. Lincoln Park Middle School just had a big STEM career field. Well, everyone that I talk to especially when I'm training folks in workforce training programs, many of them without high school diplomas, and then the high school students, I make sure and tell them that carpentry is a STEM field. And so
Mhm.
we're not putting the dollars in the CTE programs and we're not framing. There's so many different ways that I think our larger systems at play could be supporting putting the resources into growing our workforce and also growing our sort of capacities in our community. I don't know how else to say it, but I think that's the biggest obstacle. It's not technical, as I said, or challenge.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting. All right. Someone has a question. Do you have a new home plan book or one that could be shared with prospective buyers and their builders?
Yes. On our website, if you go to homes, you can see the homes that are up that we've put up right now, and there are a few more. We also have a PDF sheet that's kind of like, here's the different styles, and they've got the plan, et cetera. We also on our website show there are downloadable PDFs about, well, what are the construction assemblies like? How is this house built? What are the elements in it? So that's all on our website.
Okay. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. Another question. Do you see other organizations such as Just Housing, other organizations like that on board with the angles you addressed in the slide titled Everything Everywhere All at Once? And
So
from
I,
where
I
do
give
you source your inspiration?
I, gi- I give the shout out to my colleague Leah Carmaker for the Everything Everywhere All at Once or whatever I wrote, because it's been a running joke in our office that I can't remember the name of that movie. So I always mess up the title of it. And so at some point when I put it on the slide, I had to actually look it up, make sure I got it right. So do I see other folks doing what we're doing, the everything everywhere all at once? I haven't, to be honest. But I've seen and learned from other folks around the country doing certain elements of it beautifully. Right in our state, Center for Energy and the Environment, they are running a workforce training program that is really outstanding. And they're a much bigger organization than just housing. And they have in 3 years, I believe, run more than 200 people through a very comprehensive program that supports the folks in the program with stipends, with additional services. So that's mncee.org. That's their website, but it's Center for Energy and the Environment. Now, they're not doing stock housing plans. I know of other organizations that are doing, I think, climate appropriate standardized housing plans. I don't know if anyone else that's doing all of their services, fees, scaled fees, but maybe I just haven't looked. So, I wish there was one of us in, every city or at least every state. The need is great. And the more folks that are sort of putting this kind of stuff out there, the more we make it accessible, the more people are gonna utilize it and go in that direction. I think that is a big, another big obstacle toward pursuing robust, resilient housing solutions is, well, people don't know there's a problem. And then if they do vaguely know there's a problem, they have no idea that there are solutions out there that are vetted for fixing it. So lots of folks keep trying to reinvent something that we've got good paths to do this. Let's magnify them.
Awesome. I've got one more question here. We'll see. Someone wants a link to the website. So your website for Just Housing. So we'll put that up or in the chat. And then where could we learn more about the Empower movement? I don't know if you said more about that, but that is a question.
Oh, so shout out to Angela Heikkila at Minnesota North College, who started a program called Empower. And I told her I was stealing part of her name. So Angela is an electrician, and she has worked with the Minnesota North College kind of consortium to do a lot of outreach to women and non-traditional students mostly in northern Minnesota, to bring them into trades and other non-traditional careers. And it's called Empower. We started a little project called Empowerment with a grant from CERTS. So it's a CERTS seed grant. Shout out to them too. We hope to continue empowerment. There's a little bit about it on our website under news. We're not real good at our website, and we'll try to get better at sort of stating all the different things we're doing. We're a really small operation, and when we're doing the work, sometimes organizing it in a public facing manner is hard for us. You can also send me an email if you want to know more about the Empowerment Project and if and how you can tap in to that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We have posted links to the Just Housing webpage. I will go through and get your email if that's okay with you and post that in the chat as well.
Absolutely. It's also on the last slide of my slideshow, but we don't really have that up, do we? So
that's okay. We'll get that up. And then also someone asked if we could share the recording of the presentation, and I'm just going to post in the chat here again that can be found on the Minnesota Sea Grant website once the captioning and everything is done and the video has been edited.
And you can also PDF my PowerPoint and share it with anybody you want, and people can use the slides, take whatever you want. We are as much about open source as possible. We want folks to utilize this.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one last question here so far. I think it's the last one. What are Just Housing's main sources of inspiration?
That's such a good question. The other people that I encounter who get up every day and face more barriers than I do and do amazing work, not just for themselves, but for our community. And so I'm inspired by that. And I think I have a lot of privilege. And so I'm going to get up and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do what I can. And I'm honored to be in community with those that I'm in community with.
Oh, here. Thank you so much. It's people like you, Rachel, that bring me inspiration to do the kind of work we do and to get the message of all the good work being done shared out widely. So thank you so much for all you're doing for not only your small community, the greater community, and now an even bigger community. And the more I hear, it's you're very far reaching. So I'm really grateful. you were willing to share time with us today. And I'll ask everyone to give a little reaction if they can, so you can see all the applause and all the love. We've
Thank
been
you
seeing
all.
some love. I'm guessing you weren't able to see the screen throughout, but yeah, people were putting up hearts and claps along the way. So we've had a good audience today, and I'm just really thankful for everyone joining us and for your time and expertise to share with this audience. Hopefully people are going to start